Greetings, Legunus. Arendelft here. Now, I know I am very late to the party in finding out about the zero tolerance policy put out by Games Workshop in regards to fan films. But I still feel it very, very important to cover this topic because I want to tell everyone that while we should never have been surprised that Games Workshop did this, because there was a long-standing history of companies like Games Workshop doing things like this once they started branching out into the film industry, there is still a very, at least small, kernel of hope at the end of this tunnel. There is. And I would urge you to stick with me until we get there, because the whole pattern, the whole cycle, is an important thing to see. Now, the comparison I'm going to make won't seem exactly relevant because CBS, the people who own Star Trek, and the fact that, making movies and whatnot isn't exactly related to Games Workshop. Well, now that Games Workshop has Warhammer Plus, the two are very comparable. And examples like what CBS did in releasing their draconian guidelines in regards to fan films, it's not new. It's not a new thing. Corporations of this size have been doing this for a long time, and that's the second bigger reason. When I say that we should have seen this coming, it's because Games Workshop is a corporation more than anything. Because before now, they were of course happy to let fan films exist because they were free advertising of an incredibly beautiful, passionate kind. Death of Hope being the prime example in my mind, because holy terror, the level of detail, the execution. I don't care what kind of things you have, negative things you have to say about the audio of the first few episodes. That got fixed. That got fragging fixed. And that was perfect free advertising for them, made by passionate fans who loved Warhammer. And of course they weren't going to screw with that then. They had no reason to. It was purely profitable. But now that Warhammer Plus is out, you'd think that even if they couldn't buy up people like Mark Sparks' Death of Hope, that at the very least, at the very minimum, they'd leave those alone because, hey, it's still free advertising. And as long as, if anything, they could encourage it being out there and whatnot, because on the other side as well, Mark Spark has made it very clear that he's not going to be doing this forever. And maybe if they built up a goodwill with him, a good rapport, maybe he would have been willing to sell at the end or further down the line. But in any case, they weren't willing to let that rest. Not likely because it actually would have cut into their bottom line, but because corporations, unfortunately, have a very strong short-sightedness where they see things in the short term. They saw these fan films that they either couldn't buy up or weren't interested in buying up as threats, as absolute threats. And they felt that they needed to take an extremely heavy-handed approach in protecting their IP. Whereas they could have built up goodwill by encouraging fan films and being free advertising, and maybe even sponsored some of them, being like, hey, put out there Warhammer Plus, we'll give you some money, and, advertise Warhammer Plus for us. And guess what? People who go to see these fan films, who don't have to go past a paywall to go and see them, they watch the fan film at the beginning of it, they talk about sponsored by Warhammer Plus. And then they watch the fan film, and then at the very end, they talk about Warhammer Plus again. And maybe if the actual person, the author of it, has seen, has Warhammer Plus, they can then give their own, when they do the actual sponsor video, they could have talked about that. I mean, I can't even cover that enough, how badly Games Workshop is screwed up here. Your stuff is behind a paywall. That is going to be a huge that's a wall. That's literally a freaking wall that's going to prevent a lot of people from being interested in it And if the free stuff advertises for you because you're paying them to advertise for you because it's the perfect kind of sponsorship, it's just genius. But this is the kind of stuff Games Workshop doesn't see. I mean, corporations don't tend to see the long term. I know a lot of people argue the point with me, but in this regard, I would absolutely argue they don't see the long-term benefits. They really don't. And when CBS did what they did to Axanar, when there was so much potential just to hire them on, to purchase them as, to purchase what they were working on or whatever, to actually forge a rapport with them, to talk to them and be like, hey, we think Axanar looks really, really cool. Can we learn more about what you're doing? Build up a rapport, maybe purchase Axanar and hire them on and be, holy crap, you would have had something so much better than STD, Star Trek Discovery. But instead they went nuclear, and so many other corporations have done this. And a big part of the problem is that it's because of their size. It's because of their sheer size. So many departments that don't properly communicate with one another. That just, holy terror, they just, oh. And when they don't properly communicate with one another, one department makes a decision such as like legal, for example, be like, no, we need to protect our IP. And another department, I mean, maybe there's a few people inside of it that are just like, no, if we leave these fan film productions alone, it'll be fine. But legal's like, no, we need to go nuclear. We need to get rid of it. And they don't understand what fan goodwill is. They don't understand what the long term is. And any consultants the board of directors have that they pay to understand the fans and whatnot, that they pay to be in depth with that, are drowned out by the scary legality or what the frag ever of something like the legal department and whatnot. And it's just complications such as that. And unfortunately, with the slow-moving gears and wheels of a corporation, it takes them being hit in their wallets before they'll actually begin to comprehend that they screwed up. In other words, it takes huge fan outcry. It takes the fans standing up and going, hey, you done screwed up, so loudly that the corporation all the way at the top, the board of directors, don't need consultants anymore that they pay to learn about this kind of stuff. They don't need them to hear it. They can hear it being screamed out at them through their closed windows. That's sadly what it takes, and that's exactly what happened with CBS and Axanar. They didn't completely release their draconian rules. They didn't drop those idiotic guidelines, but they did give Axanar a little bit of slack, which helped them breathe. They're back on the road to trying to make another production, which will still take them some time, even though they've just barely gotten back up to the financial point where they can do it again. It will take time. But if what they make is anything even close to what the original production was, which it most likely not only will be, but even more, it will be much better most likely because they've learned from what they've done, then what will come will be amazing. Absolutely amazing. I cannot emphasize that enough. I can't emphasize enough how absolutely beautiful that'll be. And that's the kernel of hope at the end of this tunnel. That is it right there. The fact that if the fans band together and use their wallets to speak, not go online and type out angry rants at every opportunity, especially where it wasn't relevant. They just start filling up comment sections wherever they can on social media and just try to put it out there. Not where they harass Games Workshop's employees who had nothing to do with this decision. Not where they work accidentally or even sometimes purposefully against the very thing that they are supporting, supposedly or otherwise. No, it's where you boycott Games Workshop. That's what you do if you want them to listen to you. You boycott them with your wallets. I don't mean a picket line around your local Games Workshop store. Heck, I don't even mean that you can't go into your local Games Workshop store or anything like that. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm just saying don't buy anything directly from them anymore. Now, some people might be asking, well, what's the point of going into a Games Workshop store if you don't buy anything? You can still play. The hobby is still a beautiful thing, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. But if there is any way, shape, or form that you can contribute money to Warhammer, and you see that, and you're like, you want to make a difference here. You want Games Workshop to realize that what they've done against these content creators who, for so long, whether Games Workshop wants to admit it or not, earns them money, who earned them money, because whether they want to admit it or not, it was free advertising, and they definitely caused people to flock to Games Workshop. What they've done to them is despicable. It's vile, and it should be opposed. I know personally that despite the fact that I love the lore of Warhammer 40k and Warhammer besides Age of Sigmar, I'm not a big fan of Age of Sigmar at all. But in older Warhammer Fantasy and Warhammer 40k and 30k, I love the lore. I will not be buying any more books, at least not directly from Games Workshop. I'll buy them secondhand. I'll search old bookstores. I'll look online for people who are on social media selling them off or whatever when I have the opportunity. I'll go to local hobby stores and ask around, hey, is anybody looking to sell off some of their old books? That's what I'll do from here on in. But I will not buy directly from Games Workshop until, and this is an important key right here that I want people to remember, because while Games Workshop have proven that, like many corporations, they're completely tone deaf, but on the other hand, they do have their marketing departments that do understand people. And you can bet your bottom dollar that Games Workshop will partially go back on their ban, on their zero tolerance policy in some minor way that will look bigger than it is. If they think it'll even get a small portion of any fans that are boycotting them, of any of their paying customers who are boycotting them, to come back. You can bet your bottom dollar that they will. Which is why I want to tell people, do not decide, if you decide to boycott Games Workshop, don't come back to them at the first sign that they're turning around. Make them convince you, the paying customer. Make them convince you. They certainly convinced you to boycott them. So why should... And they made it difficult for you to be a customer. They made it difficult for you to be a fan. So why on earth should you turn around and make it easy for them? Tell me that one. You shouldn't. At least not in my own opinion. If you feel as passionately about this as I do, and you want Games Workshop to recant on this, yeah. That's, in my opinion, what you should do. However, I know for some people that a total boycott of Games Workshop will seem extreme. That I understand, because a lot of people, they actively go to the tournaments on a regular basis. They love to get all the latest models, the latest books. They love to be perfectly up to date on the lore. If that's your lifestyle, I can understand it. However, even if that's your lifestyle, and you are upset about what Games Workshop has done to content creators, at the very least, I would still ask you, boycott Warhammer Plus. Don't get it. Because that's at the core of this. That's at the very, very core. It's easy for me to completely boycott Games Workshop for what they've done, because I've never even been to a tournament, a Games Workshop tournament, whether for Warhammer Fantasy or whether for Warhammer 40k. I've never been to one. And honestly, I have no plans to. I got a lot of models which are heavily kit bashed, sometimes with non-Games Workshop pieces and whatnot, and I do have some models that are just straight up not Games Workshop models that I like to use and whatnot, and I know that those wouldn't be permitted. And as I've been upgrading the bases for my models, You know, like for my Space Marines, from the 28mm to I think it is the 32, I've used a lot of non-standard bases to do that because Games Workshop isn't providing me any, and I was just like, well, I'll use what I've got. So for a good majority of my models, I couldn't participate in those tournaments anyway. So for me, boycotting them until they hopefully change their minds on this and realize the mistake that they've made is relatively easy. But I know that for those of you who are much, much more embedded in there, it's probably more difficult no matter how passionate you are about this. So that's why I ask you that at the very least, boycott Warhammer Plus. In any case, though, these are my thoughts and feelings on this. None of us should be surprised that Games Workshop did this because they're a huge corporation and they're pretty tone deaf to us. They are pretty tone deaf to us, and they've got too many talking heads that all think that they can make the decisions and whatnot. Something like this was almost inevitable. I know that there have been big companies out there which have actually embraced their fans, embraced their paying customers who create fan films of their IPs. I know that that has happened, and they have done it to great success. But unfortunately, there seems to be a much greater amount which are tone deaf to how profitable that can be, and they examine the short term and lose sight of just how amazingly profitable it could be to instead build up their goodwill to use those who create these productions, who out of their own pockets and out of their own time create these fan films. Yeah, they just don't see how that could be profitable. By the way, on one last note on creating fan films, think about this. These people, unless they're already a hugely successful YouTuber who's really big, and I know like TTS, you know, he is pretty big and whatnot, but imagine if TTS had a full support staff, especially those that could do the animation for him and whatnot, while he focused on being the director of the overall project and whatnot. Imagine being hired up by Games Workshop, he being able to, like, how much faster he could potentially pump out episodes if he was fully staffed by Games Workshop and not all the bills paid by them. Just think about that. Those that have been hired on by Games Workshop can arguably pump out either, you know, and or better quality or faster, or possibly even both with greater resources at their disposal, as long as they're allowed to continue making the very stuff that attracted Games Workshop to hiring them in the first place, that got them so many fans in the first place. Think about that for one moment. Like, those who still are not under the umbrella of Warhammer Plus will be doing it at a much slower pace. They would have been no threat, no serious threat to Warhammer Plus, and if Games Workshop had just utilized them for free advertising, that would have been utterly amazing. Amazing. Like, people would have been able to see advertisements for Warhammer Plus without encountering a paywall, as they wanted to see. They would have seen, you know, I want to go and see this person's fan film production that I've been waiting for ages, and the first thing they see is an advertisement for Warhammer Plus, and at the very end of the video, then the original creator can be like, hey, I myself have Warhammer Plus, and I can say it's actually worthwhile, or whatnot, if that indeed was the case, if they felt that that was their opinion and whatnot, and accept the endorsement. Holy fragging Terra. The amount of goodwill they could have gotten from that blows my mind. In any case, though, yeah, once again, I know I got a little bit off track there. Yeah, Games Workshop, you have massively, massively blundered in this area. You have face planted so hard. You've left skid marks all the way across the pond into America. Yeah, we're still finding your face skid marks on roads over here. That's how bad you've blundered. You face planted that hard. Anyway. But if I'm going to end on one final note, I want to let people know that people like Mark Spark, who made the amazing Death of Hope, is now working on his own IP. And so is the original creator for If the Emperor had text-to-speech device and whatnot. They are not done. They are still making their own stuff. I mean, I don't know if the creator for, what is it, Brovo Alpha, I don't know if he's making it from his own IP, but he is covering other things. And if you loved their original works, believe me when I say, if they are still, after this horrible brutalizing from Games Workshop, are still willing to go out there and make amazing animations for us to see, yeah, bet your bottom dollar that they will be amazing. Because if you loved them before, even if, you know, Warhammer is just your main cup of tea, you don't like other things, give them a chance at the very least. Because if they made something you loved before, you bet your bottom dollar they're going to make something you probably at the very least will like. In any case, everyone, those are my thoughts and opinions on the subject. Please let me know what you think, whether you agree or disagree with me down in the comment section below. And, yeah. And if you did enjoy this video, please go ahead and throw it a thumbs up. And if you didn't, well, thank you for sticking around this long. And I'll see you in the next one, Legionist. Don't you all be getting into too much trouble, or do. It's always up to you. Toodles, Legionists.